practical items. On your GoToWebinar toolbar, you'll see there's a question section where you can type in questions. If you have questions as the webinar is underway, please type them in. I will monitor them, and I will interrupt Richard if he ever pauses for breath, and give him the opportunity to respond. If there's time at the end before 1 p.m. EST, we'll also give people the opportunity to ask questions. You have the ability to raise your hand, and then I can unmute you and you'll be able to ask your question. So I think without further ado, I'll hand it over to Richard, and off you go, Richard.
Thanks, AG. Thanks for the facetious comment about being difficult to interrupt me. So today we want to talk to you about enterprise reporting with TM1, the new landscape. Why a new landscape? Well, when we scheduled this webinar, we knew that version 10.2 of TM1 was in the offing. We weren't sure it was going to be launched by today, but indeed it is launched by today. So when I say the new landscape, I'm really talking about the landscape in the context of TM1 version 10.2. So our agenda for today, moment, I seem to have a logistical, there we go. So here's our agenda for the day. I'm going to start off, as I prepared this seminar, I realized that if we're going to talk about 10.2, it would be only fair to go over the features that are new in 10.2. So we're going to start off with a little bit of overview of version 10.2 of TM1, what's new and what your options are. Then we're going to specifically talk about the reporting options out of 10.2. And the key point here is you have a lot of options, and you have more with version 10.2 of TM1 than you've had with any previous version. You've got 2 different Excel add-in clients. You've got a revised Cognos Insight. You've got a new TM1 Web. You've got a brand new Cognos Mobile. So we want to talk about those reporting options available to you, and in what sense, under what circumstances you might use each of those options. And going along with that, really when you use each of those options is depending upon the types of reports that you're going to use and the recipients that you have for those reports. And you'll see me making a point which won't surprise many of you that I know that are on this webinar, that it's not realistic or not terribly logical to assume that every single consumer of information from your TM1 system throughout the enterprise is going to use the same reporting tool. Indeed, that's not what IBM envisages either. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll then focus specifically on Excel reporting, and we'll give you a demonstration of QueBIT's ReportWork product, which allows you to schedule the production of Excel-based reports and distribute them via different mechanisms. So what is new in IBM Cognos TM1 version 10.2? And this is a slide that I borrowed from IBM. And really, we can look at the improvements in 4 different areas. First of all, there have been significant performance improvements throughout, and I'll talk more about the specifics, from the core TM1 engine itself, making better use of multi-threading, to TM1 being completely TM1 Web being re-engineered from top to bottom. So throughout the process for 10.2, you'll see that there's better performance. There's a metric scorecard and strategy map capability built into TM1 now. So for those of you who are doing scorecarding type applications, that is now native to TM1. Engagement is really about the new clients that are in TM1, the new and improved Cafe, which now supports TM1. I'll talk more about that later, as well as the mobile, so the iPad mobile application for TM1, improved TM1 Web, and so on. Also, in terms of deployment, TM1 is, as of 10.2, is available on the cloud. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of these options. As far as faster performance goes, IBM, one of the things that IBM has done is invest an awful lot in the R&D of TM1 and all of the enabling applications that surround it. So reports, dashboards, charts update faster than before. TM1 Web has been re-engineered from top to bottom. It only updates the cells it needs, less screen flashing, and so on. And the Café Excel add-in architecture has greatly improved the wide area network Excel performance, and also improved the performance in the response time in Performance Modeler. The big thing, one of the big things that's in the core engine of TM1 is that now TM1 supports multi-threaded queries. What does that mean? Well, what that means is with versions of TM1 prior to 10.2, if I were a single user logged into the server and I had a 16-core server and I were doing a very large query, I would only use one core because the TM1 used its multi-threading by using a single core for each user before. So even though I was only one user and I had 16 cores available, only one of them would be used. What happens now is that that query is broken into multiple threads, and I will use all 16 cores even though I'm only a single user. So this has the potential to make a lot of difference with response time, and the early views of this are that we're getting a lot of improvement in performance as a result of this. TM1 Web is engineered from top to bottom. It no longer uses Microsoft Internet Information Server. It's entirely Java-based, top to bottom. And the key thing here is to notice that with version 10.2, the web sheet only updates the cells that need updating. So you see the little picture here where on the right with 10.2, only 2 cells need to be updated. So only 2 cells worth of data migrate from the client from the server to the client, and that gives you a much crisper response time. I have to say that also with TM1 Web, just the overall look and feel of it is much better than the previous version. So let me just get to the next slide here. There we go. Scorecarding, this is probably a subject of a webinar all on its own at some point. But the whole idea here is that TM1 now has the TM1 application has the whole structure built into it to understand what a metrics dimension is, what a metrics cube is, what a strategy map is. And so it makes it much easier to build a scorecard type application. Now, for those of you who've been using TM1 for a while, you'll say, well, you know, I've been building scorecarding apps in TM1 for a long time. And indeed you have, and when you look at the scorecarding capability in 10.2, you'll say, well, oh, that's kind of the way I was doing it. And the idea of the scorecarding app is that it does make it much easier for you. It provides a framework for you to build a scorecard in. So as I say, probably more of that in another webinar. New clients. So one of the big ones that's going to really impact us is the Cognos analysis for Excel, which is the new Excel add-in for TM1. So Café is not new in the sense that Café existed as an Excel client for BI data that was housed in Cognos BI or in the data warehouse or whatever, but it was not previously able to access TM1 data. It now is able to access TM1 data, and it does it in a very clever way using a REST server, which I'll talk more about in a minute, and that translates into much better performance. So Café is the Excel client that we'll be using going forward. That doesn't mean Perspectives is going away. Perspectives still has a role to play, and again, I'll talk more about that down the road. Cognos Insight is the desktop dashboarding component of the Cognos suite. Very useful for sending out distributed models to people and allowing, for example, you could send out a Cognos Insight application to all your sales reps, and they could analyze that data on their desktop disconnected. Cognos TM1 Web we already talked about. Again, designing sheets in Excel, and by the way, that's where the TM1 Perspectives client still plays a role, because as of version 10.2, you can only publish web sheets from Perspectives, not from Cafe. And then the brand new Cognos Mobile contributor, so it's not just an iPad app that lets you look at your TM1 data. It's actually an iPad app that lets you update data. So if your sales team want to update their forecast directly through the iPad, they can do that with the Cognos Mobile. So a lot of new client capabilities in 10.2. Here's a very quick look at Cafe. Cafe is the new Excel add-in. It's much more of an in-spreadsheet browser look, and this is a very, very busy screen. But we do expect that we'll do a whole webinar on Cafe down the road and give you an in-depth look at its capabilities. But just to point out some highlights here, you see this metadata tree on the left. This is your navigation, sort of like the Server Explorer in the TM1 Perspectives client. And you can simply drag and drop views from that metadata pane to the Excel spreadsheet, and you get, those of you who are familiar with the in-spreadsheet browser in Perspectives, you get that type of experience. Although I don't mean to belittle the in-spreadsheet browser in Perspectives, but this is a very well-engineered, very attractive-looking environment, and you can see from the slide there that it really looks crisp and professional. All of the same icons that you're familiar with in existing Excel client tools, so you can commit your values to the cube here. You can undo. You can convert to a flex view, and again, I don't want to get into details here, but what we're seeing here in this particular screen is just a view of rendered in the spreadsheet. But if you convert it to a flex view, that becomes much more like a report that you might save and work with and enhance. So flex views are in Cafe kind of what heavily formatted reports were in Perspectives. The usual drag and drop dimensions, so it's an ad hoc browser, but not in a separate application like in Perspectives. Rather, it's in the spreadsheet. And the usual color coding, white cells are writable. When you update cells, they change color, so you can see impacted cells and things like that. So that's Cafe. This slide is really talking about the flex view capability, how by converting a sheet to a flex view, you can then do all the formatting. You see on the right how rows have been inserted and formatting applied and so on. One of the other clients that's new with 10.2 is Cognos Insight. Now, some of you are going to say, no, Richard, Cognos Insight's already been around, but it is quite significantly improved in version 10.2, and I know not many people are deploying it yet, so I'm counting it as net new, even though technically it came out with 10.1. And Cognos Insight again is either a disconnected desktop dashboard client, or it can connect to a TM1 server and be a rich dashboarding client. So lots and lots of choices in Cognos 10.2.
Richard.
Yes.
A question came up on whether Cafe requires Excel to be in manual mode. I mean, Perspectives doesn't require Excel to be in manual mode, but a lot of people choose to work that way, because it gets annoying and slow otherwise.
Yeah.
Do you know about Cafe?
I don't, but I could take an educated guess, and I know Mike Cowie's lurking, so if I guess wrong, hopefully he'll correct me. I would assume that the manual versus automatic calc mode is going to be much less of an issue for Cafe. And the reason is that Cafe, even if you're in a Flex view, is retrieving grids of information from the Flex server. And you have to commit a conscious action to refresh it. Now, I'm not sure whether hitting the F9 key to recalculate initiates a refresh or not. Mike, do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't know that it does. I don't think it does. So
I don't think it does. So that's a very good question. I'm guessing at the answer, and I have played around with Cafe, so I should know, but we can definitely clarify that. But the whole issue of recalculation is going to be a lot less of an issue with Cafe because the calculation is much more efficient. I actually have a slide where I talk about the Cafe architecture in a few minutes. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Richard. And there was one other question I'll just comment on quickly, whether OLAP objects is supported with TM1 10.2, and I happen to know the answer is yes.
Well, the answer is yes, and the OLAP objects, or web work as we now call it, is supported in 10.2 in Perspectives, and OLAP objects or web work will support Cafe at some point going forward. And the thing is that both Cafe and Perspectives are valid Excel client tools in version 10.2 of TM1. At some point, Cafe will assume all of the Excel functionality and become the single Excel add-in, or at least that's our interpretation as QueBIT. That's not IBM saying that, but it seems highly likely that that's the direction that IBM is going. And the main difference between Cafe and Excel at the moment is Cafe does not support DBR formulae. So that's why I think that the calculation is going to be much less of an issue. Before everybody recoils in horror and says, well, without DBR I can't do my richly formatted reports, I'll talk more about that later, but our research shows that Flex views go a long, long way and may go all the way to producing your heavily formatted reports in a somewhat easier fashion than Perspectives.
And Cafe is part of the standard license, right? Everybody gets it. Yes.
Everybody gets it. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll go over this slide pretty quickly because I don't want to take away from Dominic doing a report work demo here. But the key takeaway here is that IBM is now offering Cognos TM1 as a cloud offering. So if anybody wants to run it in the cloud and not host it themselves and pay a monthly fee to a cloud hosting organization, in this case IBM, then that is now an option. The challenge with this, and I don't mean to say that this isn't a viable approach because it certainly depends on your circumstances. If you're going to run TM1 in the cloud, you have to solve the problem of how you connect, how you get your data into the cloud to load it into the TM1 server. So TM1 is now available as a cloud option, which is important. So let's talk about our reporting options. As you can see, the list is rather long here. Under Excel reports, we've got both Perspectives and Cafe. And we've also got Cognos Insight and Cognos Mobile on the list. So Cafe is new. It's new to TM1 in 10.2. People have been using Cafe with BI for some time now, but it's brand new with TM1. And there's a lot of new rich functionality in there, which I think the TM1 community, the initial reaction may be, oh dear, this is different, this may not give me what I want, but I think if you persevere with it, you'll find there's a lot of richness in Cafe. And one of the things we want to do at the end of this webinar is invite your suggestions as to what the next one should be. And relatively close to the top of my list is Cafe, so I'd welcome your input. But what we'd like to do is get into more depth in Cafe and show you some specifics. As I mentioned before, TM1 Web is re-engineered top to bottom. No longer Microsoft IIS. It's all Java-based, and so no IIS. Cognos Insight, I'm saying, is new. I already explained that. It's very new in 10.2, although it did exist in prior releases. And of course, Cognos Mobile is brand new with version 10.2. So let's compare Perspectives and Cafe. Perspectives, I'm assuming that everyone on this call has some familiarity with Perspectives. Perspectives has a cube browser built into it, but that browsing is not in the spreadsheet. In Cafe, the equivalent of the cube browser, so you've got exactly the same functionality, but that cube browsing is actually in the spreadsheet, just like the in-spreadsheet browser that was, and in fact is still in Perspectives, but not too many people seem to use. In Perspectives, you do your heavily formatted, comparative P&L type report, complex balance sheets, using DBR formula, DBRs which pull values from the cubes. We're all used to doing that in Perspectives. In Cafe, you do that same thing with flex views. So you take a view, as I was showing on the previous screen, and you drag and drop it into Excel, and then you convert it to a flex view. And what happens with a flex view is that the Cafe add-in uses named ranges to keep track of everything, so it knows which number to pull into which cell. And that means that there are no formulae, which is going to be different for people who are used to Perspectives, but it also makes it easier for Cafe to move the data efficiently over a wide area network, which is one of the major design considerations with Cafe. One of the things to be aware of in version 10.2, Cafe does not have the ability to publish TM1 Web sheets, so you will need to use Perspectives to publish those, at least for this version. We fully expect to see that at some stage in the future, that publishing of web sheets will migrate to Cafe. So let's look at Perspectives versus Cafe in a more technical sense. Both of them use client-server technology, but Perspectives, as some of you know, has a client. As a client, is what we call chatty. So if you've got 100,000 SKUs in your dimension and you want to browse that cube, Perspectives is going to load all 100,000 elements down to the client and can give you pretty slow performance as a result. So if you've got a LAN that's got relatively low bandwidth or high latency, you tend to get poorer performance than we would like with Perspectives, and the solution is typically to use something like Citrix to ameliorate that. With Cafe, however, the first thing I have to say, it's got a very modern UI. It's very aesthetically pleasing, which is no small thing. The other thing that we shouldn't lose sight of is that Cafe, because it has its roots as an Excel client for BI, it can bring BI and TM1 data together in Excel, which for those clients who are using BI is quite an advantage. So you might have detailed sales data in a relational data store somewhere, and you could bring that together with TM1 data in Excel. It's also client-server technology, but it uses a 3-tier architecture. So I have a TM1 server and a REST server and a client, and REST stands for Representational State Transfer, which sounds very fancy, but what it really means is that when Cafe wants some data from the client, it says to the REST server, hey, I want to browse this cube. Give me the first screen full of data, and the REST server says, well, that browse you asked for has, 50,000 rows on it, so I'm not going to give you 50,000 rows. I'm going to compose the view on the REST server, but I'm only going to send you down a screen full of it to the, and I'm being a little loose with my technical description here, but basically the REST server acts as an intermediary server to make the dialogue to the client very efficient, and that's why you get good WAN performance. And in fact, if you look at this next slide, this is my attempt to explain what's going on. So the client tool makes a request of the client. That goes to the REST server. The REST server communicates very strongly with the TM1 server. That's why I've shown big arrows between the REST server and the TM1 server. But the communication between the REST server and the client is very optimal. Bottom line is you get pretty good performance on a wide area network with Café. It's about as good as it's ever going to get. And unless you've got a really troublesome network, your performance with Café over a wide area network should be pretty close to as good as a web browser. So many of you are aware that with TM1 Web you can get pretty good performance with a wide area network. You literally have someone in London inputting budget data into a server in North America. And the expectation is with Café that you'll get similar response time to that. Just want to talk briefly before I hand over to Dominic about the types of reports and the recipients of those reports, because this is important, because there really are, in this world, there are analytical reports and then there are sort of transaction type reports. So an analytical report might be a P&L. It might be a comparative P&L 3 months this year versus 3 months last year. It might be a comparative P&L that lets you choose a particular product or even a customer, so you're getting a very granular view of the world. The essence of an analytical report like that is that it really is easy to lay out in Excel. It's grid-oriented, and you know, it's easy to lay out in Excel. On the other hand, if you look at detailed sales and margin reports by customer, product, or geography, they tend to be much more, here's a particular product, here's all my list of customers that bought it, maybe drill through to invoices to see the dates they bought it and which particular ship-tos it went to and so on. These are very different types of reports. And the other thing is we have different types of report recipients. So we've got financial analysts, we've got marketing people, we've got sales people, we've got IT professionals, we've got HR personnel, all sorts of different people receiving our reports. So it's unrealistic, in our opinion, to expect to use a single reporting tool for all of these recipients. So we think a combination of all of these, and I don't show report work on here, but you'll see in a minute that report work has a role to play, allow you to deploy your TM1 information throughout the enterprise. So, you know, TM1 Web, if you don't have any BI infrastructure, TM1 Web is an excellent way of getting TM1 reports out to the enterprise. Excel is great for analytical reports. It's great for putting power into the hands of the financial analyst or the marketing professional who's very comfortable with Excel, and Café lets us do that. Cognos BI, if you've invested in the BI infrastructure, is a great way for getting a lot of that reporting information out to the enterprise using dashboards, and Cognos BI does have the ability to schedule distribution of reports and bursting and so on. Cognos Insight for desktop dashboards and offline contribution, and I'm not even showing Cognos Mobile on here, which I really ought to. So the point I'm making here is you've got a wealth of different tools available to you, and if you've got hundreds or thousands of users, expect that these tools will be deployed to different subsets of that user base dependent on their needs. So, you know, an Excel report, something that's reported in Excel is typically going to be built by the user or the power user. It's built by the financial analyst, by the marketing professional, by the engineer who's looking after a certain operational capability. TM1 Web or Web Work allows you to make that report self-service, and Report Work can provide automated report generation and distribution. If you look at Cognos BI reporting, reports are typically built by IT, although of course Analysis Studio provides self-service capabilities. It certainly scales across the enterprise. If you've invested in a BI infrastructure, it's a very good way of getting that report distribution handled on a scalable basis. couple of the things you need to be aware of with BI specifically going against TM1 data. BI handles security differently, I should say a little bit differently than TM1. So you need to be a little bit careful if you're using very granular security in TM1. You have to be a little bit creative to get the results you would expect in BI. And we've certainly had a fair amount of experience with that now. So if you find yourself deploying data, deploying BI to report against TM1 data, do reach out to us at QueBIT, and we'd love to share our experiences with you. One of the other things that we learned pretty early on in the process, if you're using TM1 cubes as a source for BI reporting, you almost certainly need to build different cubes than the ones you use for the modeling. You want to do things like flatten out hierarchies. Dimensions that have multiple hierarchies in TM1 may well become multiple dimensions in the TM1 cube that's used for BI reporting. So just to sum up, Excel versus BI, reports that are heavily formatted with lots of calculations, often at the cell level, are much easier to do in Excel and more difficult to do in BI. But if you really want to scale reports across the enterprise and you're willing to invest in a BI infrastructure, then that's the way to do it. Which kind of brings me into the point of this slide that if you are producing reports out of Excel, TM1 has a report distribution capability built in, but it's not very rich. And that's why we've developed our report work product to specifically allow you to produce and distribute reports in an intelligent manner. So let's talk a little bit about report work. First of all, it leverages existing TM1 Excel reports. So it's assuming, and Dominic's going to start showing us this in just a minute. So it leverages the existing Excel reports. It distributes bundles of reports into reporting books, and it can distribute them via email by dropping them into specific folders in the file system, or by loading them into SharePoint. And we can support Excel or PDF. You can choose which either one. Leveraging TM1 subsets. So if you want to send out a report to Mike Cowie, which just has the QueBIT software cost centers in it, then I can set up a subset of those cost centers and mail that report to Mike Cowie. So we can basically have a single report which will serve a lot of purposes because we drive it with parameters. So that allows us to create reporting packages for a wide variety of target audiences. We do support the full capability of active forms, so TM1 active forms. And we also support our own boost work, which was formerly called OLAP objects expansions, so that you can do dynamic reports on rows or columns in Excel reports. And you can also schedule things so that we can send out reports according to a schedule. Just to define some terms before I hand over to Dominic, when we say in the context of report work, report, we mean an Excel worksheet. But then you'll hear Dominic talk about books, and a book is a series of Excel worksheets bound into a single report book. Parameter we already talked about. That's how I run the report for a number of cost centers, departments, whatever. A job is a series of job steps, and a job step is one or more report books. So we've deliberately made report work very flexible to allow you to configure an awful lot of capabilities in the way that you distribute reports. Just to give you a sense of what the architecture is, what Dominic is going to show you as soon as I hand over to him is the report work client, and the report work client is used to set up report jobs and define the parameters and who's going to receive them. But you can also run the reports on the client, and Dominic will be showing that. Those job specifications are stored in control cubes on the TM1 server. So those of you familiar with the control cube concept on the TM1 server can look at them, and you can even work with them directly, although it's obviously easier to work with them through the client. And the third thing is that the ReportWorks server allows you to either run a job on the server on demand by making a request from the client, or it can be triggered by a scheduled TI process. So either way, but normally the key takeaway here is the ReportWorks server is typically where you're going to run these jobs. If you're going to run 1,000 reports, you don't want that running on the admin's workstation. You want that running on a server so the admin can be off doing other things while those 1,000 reports get generated. Dominic, over to you for a demo of ReportWorks.
Okay, thank you very much. And so somebody pass me the screen. I'll be able to take you in and show you what.
Yep, I will attempt to do that. AG gets there first.
Okay, I'll race you. Done it. Should be yours, Dominic.
All right, on. Got you. Okay, well, thank you very much, Richard. And now let me show you what Richard was talking about. So this, what you see in front of you, is the ReportWorks ribbon. It comes into Excel. This is the client that you'll typically be building and working with. Now, you'll see the ribbon comes in. I've got parameters, reports, books, both of which Richard mentioned to you, and jobs and run jobs. Now, in essence, you're going to move from left to right. But let me start off by showing you an example of a report that I'm going to generate using ReportWorks, and then we'll work our way back. If I go into Run Jobs, I get here a list. In this case, I have 3 jobs available to me. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this job, Distribute Monthly Financials. Now, as this runs, what it's actually going to be doing is it's running, and you can see in the background what's actually happening. It's going to run a balance sheet and income statement report, in this case for 2 regions I have, for Toronto and Atlanta. And then it's going to populate that to a folder on my computer, but you can imagine this being a folder on the network. So, okay, jobs complete. Let's go take a look at that report. I look into my reports folder. There it is. Regional Financials book. You can see the date timestamp on the 12/38. Let me go ahead and open it up. Okay, so as I promised, it's a balance sheet for Toronto and Atlanta, followed by an income statement for Toronto and Atlanta. A couple of features I want to highlight in here. I've taken out all of the TM1 formulas. So there are no subnums and no DBR formulas floating around. I did, however, make use of the fact that only the TM1 formulas would be taken out. So anything that I built in Excel remains. And you see over here off to the right, kind of hiding, I have a small concatenation, balance sheet for C3. I'm making a cell reference to the particular region that is being used. And that, incidentally, is being used down here in building out each sheet. Go ahead and close this. Let me save it. I'm going to go ahead and delete it out of this box just to sort of demonstrate a point. Now, the idea is I've already built the report and I've already built the job. So as I'm going forward, I want to be able to affect that job so that it has a unique list each time it goes to run. But I don't want to have to go in there and manually update that list. So as Richard pointed out, we can use subsets as a parameter to drive that job. And in this particular case, I used a subset to select Toronto and Atlanta. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to update that subset and run the job again. I'm going to come down here into my entities, and it's a public subset called Z region. Open it up. There's Toronto and Atlanta. Go ahead and select Miami and Detroit. We're going to add that to the list. So go ahead and save that. Override the existing. Go OK. Minimize. Now, I've done nothing with ReportWorks yet. All I've done is update the subset. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to rerun Distribute Monthly Financials.
And while we're running that, you notice that, as I said earlier, this is running on Dominic's client machine. So you can actually see the report being generated in the background. Later on, Dominic will show you running a job, but without running it on his machine, actually running it from the server.
And here's the report. Again, now I have Toronto, Atlanta, Miami, Detroit. And that's for the balance sheets and for income statements. So the idea is that at runtime, when the data is the freshest, I can also have a fresh subset, a fresh list that I'm going to run off of. So I don't have to maintain that. Now I could maintain this subset using a TI process, maybe a TI process that scrubs through my data to say, hey, which of the regions showed the most significant variances in the past period, and then add those regions to this list. So that when the report runs, it will include only those regions. Now let me show you how I built this, because it was actually very simple. I'm going to start off by introducing you to a report that I want to distribute. Now the report in question, I'm going to open it up. It takes a little bit of time to open up, but not too long. Now this is a report I want to send out. Now my company, we manage vendors, and I have my managers overseeing vendors. And I want them to see, we maybe update our numbers once a week. So I want my account managers to be cognizant of which vendors are doing what and how across certain GL accounts. And to show you as an example, what I've done is I've built a GL detail account, or detail report, I should say. And in this report, I'm using our BoostWorks expansion. So when I run an expansion on this report, what it's going to do is it's only going to identify those periods that have a balance in them on a column expansion, and it's only going to identify those vendors who have activity across those periods. This is important. I have over 76 vendors, and I have numerous periods. So this automates it so that I don't have to worry about any of my managers having to scroll through 76 to find the vendors who actually have activity. I have another problem. This report in its current state is attached to an income statement or balance sheet. So I'm going to show you how I handle that in ReportWorks. Let me go ahead and close this. I'm not going to save it. Back to ReportWorks. Let's get started with parameters. So I go into the parameters field, and the first thing I want to do is I want to add a parameter that I can use. And this parameter is going to be called my focus accounts. So those accounts that I want to be generated. You'll see that when I create the parameter, I have the option of having a static or a subset parameter. Static parameter, of course, this, as the name says, it'll be just one value, always used every time. In this case, I'm going to use subset. You see, as soon as I highlight subset, choose subset becomes an option. I'm going to go ahead and select subsets. Now I get a list of all the dimensions inside of my TM1 application. I'm going to go to GL accounts. I go OK. Now I get a list of all of the subsets that I have available, public subsets available in that particular dimension. I'm going to select zprint list. So I'm going to attach a zprint list of accounts. And this, again, imagine this could be a dynamic subset. Maybe it gets updated just before the report runs. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now you'll notice that I have other parameters available. And the idea here is building on the concept of TM1. And TM1, when you have a cube, you have dimensions in the cube. And the great thing about it is we have those dimensions available to use in other cubes. Well, this kind of borrows from that concept. You can have parameters that you can borrow for other reports. You can share them, because there tend to be some very specific ones that you'll typically be running your reports against. Let me close that. Go ahead and delete this out too while I'm in here. Let's jump back into Excel. Now let's add the report. So step one, I have to add a report. You see I already have 4 reports built out. I'm going to go ahead and do an add. And this report is going to be called Vendor Detail Report. Okay. What is the report? I'm going to select my source path. I'm going to navigate to a location. In this case, it's on my desktop, but you can imagine this would be a location somewhere on my network. And it's going to be main report with details. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Now you can see it opening up in the background. All right. And now, the first thing it does is it tells me I've got 3 sheets available to me: income statement, balance sheet, and GL detail. I only want GL detail. I'll go ahead and select that. So I'm going to leave the other 2 out. Now, come over here to the right. I'm going to set up a parameter to go against GL detail. I'm going to go edit parameters. Actually, first let me navigate to it. I'm going to go edit parameters. There's my focus accounts. I'm going to go ahead and select that. See, it's using zprint list. Now, the question is, where do I want to update the accounts? And in this case, I'm going to say I want to update them to this cell. where the accounts are being housed. Go ahead, hit save. It warns, this is just a warning to remind me that you still have to hit save on the report page for this to be finally saved. And down here, I can add a worksheet name location, or where do I want the name that's going to be attached to the sheet to come from? And it's basically going to come from the same place. You saw in the last example, I actually had a place off to the right where I built a concatenation to drive that name. So it doesn't have to be that cell. You have that option. So let me go ahead and hit save on this. I'm just going to wait a sec. As I hit save, as I go through, you'll see it'll always tell me once it's finished saving, once the job is done. So I've saved this report. Go ahead and close this now. I don't need this anymore. Let me now jump into the books. As you can see, I have 4 books available to me. I'm going to add a new book. And this book is going to be called Vendor Activity Book. And when I go in here, I can go ahead and add a report to that book. Now, you see, as soon as I select that, I have a list of all the reports I had in the previous screen. I'm going to select vendor detail, but keep in mind, this is to the point that Richard made, I could actually have multiple book, reports in a single book, just as I could have multiple pages, sheets, in a single report, and multiple parameters can be applied against any sheet. So permutations are growing. I'll go OK. So I've selected my vendor detail report. Now, over here is what I'm going to indicate what action I want the system to do. Do I want to remove all formulas? Remove only the TM1 formulas, personal favorite of mine, leaves intact any Excel formulas I want my end users to see. And then the last 2 options, if I have an active form, an expansion using an active form, I can actually opt to have that ran during runtime. In this case, I'm using our BoostWorks expansion, so I'm going to select that I have the Run Expansions option going so that it can do the column and the row expansions as needed. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, incidentally, if I had selected multiple reports, I would actually make these selections for each of those reports. I'm going to close out of this. Now let's go to the job. Last step. Again, I have 3 jobs. I'm going to add a new one. We're going to call this, we'll call it Highlighted. Highlight Report. Again, you're free to choose any naming convention you wish to use. And in the highlight report, the job I need to tell them what is it going to do. And I do that by adding job steps. So I'm going to go ahead and add a job step. And this first job step is going to be PDF to folder. I'm going to create a PDF file of that report. Double click on it. Again, this gives me some guidance to what I'm going to be doing. Now I'm going to set up the job. So the first thing I do is select the book. There you see a list of all my books. And again, I could select multiple books to go against a specific job. Vendor detail report is going to generate a file. You see I have the option to generate an email or SharePoint. Send it to a SharePoint site. I'm going to create it as a PDF file, and the destination is going to be, in this case, imagine this is the network, but in reality it's going to be my C drive. I have the reports folder on my C drive, and I'm going to call this report, the PDF is going to be called Vendors to Watch. Save. Press OK. Make sure I hit save before I step out of here. Okay, so the job is being saved. Now let's go ahead and run it. Let's see what we get in the end. So run selected job. And so you're going to see, again, the system is going to open up that book, the template, and it's going to run through the zprint list where I have, I think, 4 accounts listed, and it's going to run the expansions. And then it should generate the PDF file that we're going to take a look at in the end. You can actually see it doing it in the background. Now, a point here. As Richard said, I'm running this on I have the client on my computer, and I'm manually running it from my computer. But more typically, when you actually implement this, it's going to run quietly, silently on a server, so you won't actually see these steps. You'll just kick it off, and the server will actually do all the TM1 work. There you go. It's almost done. Here you go. Job complete. I go, OK. Close out of here. Let's go take a look at what we have in the reports folder. There it is. Vendors to watch. Let me go ahead and open it up. All right. 1 out of 15 pages. Oh, dear, I have a problem. Look at this. It's broken it out across multiple pages. I've neglected to format it. Now, of course, I did this by design because I want to show how easy it is to manage your job once it's being created. You don't have to go back and rebuild it from scratch. Let's make this look a little bit better than it does. I'll go ahead and delete this. So clearly I have to do something with the formatting. Here's how I'll do the formatting changes. This is the sort of thing that otherwise would have been complicated in the past. Now it's actually quite simple. So before my boss sees it, I just jump into a report. I could also have gone and just navigated on the network, but this is a nice feature. I can go ahead and open it, open source workbook directly from inside of the reports folder. You don't have to. I could, of course, navigate it to it. Go ahead and close out of there. I'm going to go to GL Detail. I need to make a couple of changes in here. One, I need to set the print area. This is just standard Excel skills, nothing special. And of course, when I set that print area, I want, when it goes to print, to use landscaping. And I want it to scale it to fit into one page. So again, all I've done is just Excel. Home, save. Actually, you know what? When unselected, I save. So I'm just saving that main report back again. All right. Now let's go back into ReportWorks and let's run that job. Highlighted reports, go ahead and run. So it's going to go through the motions. It's going to go back and start to rebuild that report on the fly. You can sort of see it starting to work in the background. But the important takeaway, again, is I don't have to rebuild this from scratch. All I'm going to do is update the template itself. So for example, if, say, I did not use an expansion in that report, but say a new account was added, rather than me having to go out and redistribute or rebuild the books, I can just go in, add that account to the template, and then run the job. Here it goes. All right. So it's completed. Actually got that. My job completed back here. We can close out of that. Let's take a look at what we got. There we go. Vendors to watch. Open it up. Much better. 4 pages. And I want to show you this. If you haven't seen our expansions and how our expansions work, the great part about them is you can run them on subset expansions and view expansions. And you can see in this case, I've got 6 months on this report. You go page down. I only got 5 months on this report, so the columns expand, which is not a feature currently supported in Active Forms. And the list is also much shorter for this account. Keep going down, 6 months, even shorter list. Now look at this one. Much larger list. Let me zoom in on it. And you can see the specifics are all laid out. So I'm now generating this, this vendors to watch PDF automatically. And remember, the subset that I'm using to build this can be dynamically built. So it will be dynamically built at runtime. Now, a typical request is going to come to me now as a person who's generating reports. Richard calls me up and says, Dominic, I like that report you have there, but the problem with it is, nobody really goes out and looks at it, and I want certain managers to see that report when it gets generated. How hard is it for you to get it emailed? And this is where I say that's easy to do. Or maybe if I wanted to leave you alone for a little while, I'll say it's really hard, and then I'll take 2 hours to do what takes 5 minutes. All right. Jump into jobs. I go to highlighted report. So this is that job that we created. You can see I have the step to PDF to folder. I'm going to add a step to that job. The step is going to be email the report. So basically, both will happen at the exact same time. I'm going to jump into email report. I'm going to select the book again. This time, I don't want it to go to PDF. Maybe Richard has indicated he wants them to get it in an Excel format. That's okay. I'm going to still say I want to send it by email. I'll leave output in Excel. Of course, I have the option to go PDF. The destination path is going to be the name of the report that's going to appear in the email. So I'm going to call this please investigate. That's going to be the name of the report. I'll go OK. And then who's going to get it? The distribution list. Go ahead and add a couple of users to it. I'll go ahead and add Richard to it. All right. Go OK. I go OK to step out of here. Make sure I hit save. I go OK. Let's go ahead and we can run this job directly from in here. So now it's going to do 2 things. It's going to go through that workbook, select that one sheet, run the expansions across the accounts that have been specified for it to be ran across. It's going to generate a PDF and send it to that report folder, and it's going to send out an email. And I will receive one, and Richard should receive one. And it's immediate, so there's no worry about any kind of latency. You know, did the report change between the time it took the PDF to generate and when the Excel came about for email? Okay. Just going to give it a couple of seconds. And it's going to take care of the email side of it now. Now again, the idea is this is the sort of job that somebody would have typically been tasked with once a week, once a month, to sit there and generate these reports all day. Some people will spend, I know some clients that have somebody do 4 to 6 hours worth of generating. This is a way in which you can free that person up from that task. It's a very mind-numbing job. You can just schedule it so that it will actually occur on its own. The job is complete. We'll take a quick look. There it is in the vendor's watch PDF. Richard, have you gotten your email?
Yep.
All right. So have I. There it is. It's in my inbox. Go ahead and open it up. There's the name, please investigate.xls. I go ahead and open that up. There's the report. You can see each of the sheets has the name of the account associated with it. All of the TM1 formulas have been taken out, but anything I had using only Excel formulas has stayed intact. And now these folks have a very specific and concise list that they're going to work with in their investigation.
Dominic, given where we are in terms of time, do you just want to sort of talk about how we can schedule jobs and how we can run jobs from the web, but talk about it briefly because we are coming up to the top of the hour.
Okay.
And
what I'm going to do this, let me go ahead. I'm going to close out of Excel, and I'm going to show you really quickly how easy it is to run a job off the web. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm going to explain to you what's happening. We also have a server component. And the server component allows users who don't have the client on their computer to interact with ReportWorks. In this case, I created a simple web page in TM1 Web. And in that simple web page, my users will get a list of all jobs available. You can see there's my new job, highlight reports available. I'm going to go ahead and select distribute monthly financials. And a TI process is going to run by this button. That TI process will kick off a script that will tell ReportWorks now to run distribute monthly finance, completely disconnected. And in the end, what we'll end up with is that report will not, there you go, it's now sitting in my inbox or on the network. And if you go to my inbox, you'll see it'll also send me a note saying that I've just kicked off a remote job. So this was tied to a TI process. You can imagine that TI process can be tied to a chore and run on a scheduled basis. So you don't even have to go in and remember to run the job. And you'll also notice no Excel is running right now on my computer. It's running Excel silently in the background.
so Dominic, if you can hand back to me, I just want to wrap up here because I don't want to run out of time and we're very close.
There you go. Go ahead, Richard.
There's my email, by the way, that came in, but let me get back to the PowerPoint. So, you know, the thing about ReportWorks is, as you see, it's pretty easy to use. It's very quick to install and set up. This isn't something that's going to take a lot of time or effort. It's easy to maintain. It's available now. We've got a number of clients who've beta tested it, and it's in production at a number of clients. We are pricing it at $150 a named user. It is a separate license from OLAP Objects. That's one of the questions that came up on the webinar. So if you're interested in seeing more about ReportWorks, contact you know, whoever your QueBIT consultant is, or contact Dominic or myself or Mike Cowie or AG or anybody else who's on this webinar.
Richard,
yes.
There was one more question. There's no reason why it wouldn't work with something like Google Mail, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No question that it would work with Google Mail. Mike, are you still on there?
Yep.
I mean, there's no problem with making it work with Google Mail, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the email portion is all based on SMTP server settings, so that would be valid with Google Mail or most other email systems.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. I'm conscious of time, and I don't know about you guys, but I hate it when webinars overrun. So I'm just trying to get to my last slide here. I really want to thank everybody for attending today. Do let us know what you think. Send emails to either myself or Dominic or anybody else. Let us know what you want in future webinar content, whether it's cafe, insight. One of the things that that you might want to know more about is demand forecasting. We're seeing an awful lot of, no pun intended, demand for people to do demand forecasting. And this is an area that's a little outside mainstream TM1, but those of you who've been following the QueBIT press releases know that we now have an advanced analytics group that are very good at doing statistical forecasting and predictive analytics. So we're expecting to do more and more demand forecasting. In fact, we're starting to do some demand forecasting for QueBIT itself, and we're finding that October, November, December, and January are traditionally slower months for QueBIT. We have a distinct seasonality pattern. So that's just a hint that if anybody's got any projects they're looking to undertake, now is a really good time to talk to AG about getting those projects scheduled at cost-effective rates. So I encourage you to think about what you want in future webinar content and email us. And again, I thank everybody very much indeed for attending today, and do let us know what you want. This is hopefully the first in a regular series of webinars. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, everyone, and happy Tuesday.